Hi guys, today I am sharing with you the advantages of raising ducks for your garden. I did want to film outside today, but the wind is at an all-time high, so I am buttoned down here in the stable. Nonetheless, I'm going to be sharing with you the advantages of raising ducks for your garden. We're going to look at raising them for ducklings, we're going to look at housing ducks and their general care, and also what they can bring to your homestead. I'm also going to be answering questions that you guys have written in with, and I'm going to be doing that throughout the episode, so when we're done, you should have a pretty comprehensive guide to raising ducks in your backyard. So we got our ducks about a year ago, and I could say it was an impulse buy. It was more like a pressured buy. We had already planned on getting ducks for the homestead, but since I took the kids that day to Tractor Supply with me, they convinced me that that was the day we needed to purchase. So we did have what we needed at home to set up for the ducks. Maybe we just hadn't planned to get them that week. So we brought home 4 Khaki Campbells, which in my opinion are one of the best, most famous and most popular egg-laying breed of domestic duck. And we are planning to breed them in the future, so stay tuned for that. However, that day we got 4 unsexed ducks, and for the longest time we couldn't work out if we had males or females. Turns out we had 4 females, so no Drake. But if you are buying unsexed ducks and the Khaki Campbell breed is what you're after, I'll give you a few tips right now so that you can look for the signs to start learning how to differentiate between males and females. So females have a solid brown head, they have dark brown eyes and a green bill, but their legs and feet are what give it away because they are brown. And as they mature, they develop a white feathering pattern on their back. Whereas the males have a darker khaki green head. They also have a green bill, but on the legs, they have dark orange legs and feet. Another telltale sign is also the quack. So females have the loud, happy duck quack that you can hear a mile of. Whereas the males have more of a raspy sounding quack. But honestly, it really took me until they started laying eggs to figure it out initially. So we're going to look at caring for baby ducklings. So ducklings do need to be kept warm, starting at about 90 degrees for the first week. That's 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you can reduce that temperature by about 5 degrees per week until the temperature in the brooder is the same as the outdoor low temperature at night. So at that time they can be transferred outside into a coop as long as it is predator proof. We used a big plastic tub with a lid that was made from a wooden frame that had hardware cloth in it. So this is what we used originally when the ducks were small. This is just a 15-gallon tub or stock tank that you'll get from Tractor Supply. And then once they got a little bit big for that, we moved them up into a bigger one, which I think is a 30-gallon stock tank. And then once they had grown out of that, we actually used it as their first kiddie pool, so it sort of doubled up for us. And then Caleb made this wooden frame here, which has just some old boards mited together at the corners, and then we have hardware cloth. I think it's a 1/2-inch hardware cloth, just stapled to the one side of it, and then that served as a top. The ducklings weren't really about sort of getting out, but when we did build the hay up as a nest in the corner, it did raise them up quite close to the top of the tank. So we put a lid on just to stop the other chickens getting in. And this is what I would put in the chicken coop at night with the lid on, just to stop the older chickens being able to access the ducklings. Ducklings are super active and very messy, and they love water. However, with that, until they have matured, they've actually got no capacity to waterproof their coats. So you do need to keep an eye that they don't get wet and then stay wet. So when they were in the tub, we gave them only drinking water in a little waterer made for chicks, and they will do their best to empty it out. We did not give them swimming water while they were in the tub. So they will flick this about, empty it out, they'll paddle around in it. So you will need to check a couple times a day that it doesn't get too wet. But what we did is we built up a big sort of pile of hay in the corner, so they had a nest they could kind of climb up on and get dry underneath the heat lamp when they were going to sleep. On warmer days, we would take them outdoors. We had some wooden boards that were screwed together in a large triangle type of frame, and that was just enough to stop them running off too far around the garden because they are super fast. And so the kids would sit with them on the grass, and we would allow supervised swimming time in small bowls of water. Ducklings do need exercise, so it's really good for their physical development if you can allow them time to run around and to go swimming. So because of how ducklings do create a wet environment, it's not really recommended that they be raised in the same brooder as baby chicks. And this is really to avoid chicks getting wet or creating a slippy surface that baby chicks would get splay-legged on. Ducklings also need a higher protein content to their diet than chickens, and they also need a source of niacin too. So before they're able to go foraging, what you will need to do is you will need to make sure that the feed that you are giving them is formulated to support ducks. Now, if you're already raising chickens and you are buying chicken food already, it can be a bit frustrating to need two separate feeds. So what we did is, while they were ducklings, we did buy feed that was formulated for them. However, as adults, we gave them the same crumble that we buy for our layers, but we added some brewer's yeast to it for the ducks. So this is brewer's yeast. This tub is actually formulated for horses, but you can see it's a powdery, flaky yeast type substance, and it's actually a fungal byproduct of the beer fermentation process. It's commercially pasteurized and deactivated and sold in tubs. You can actually get it from a lot of health food stores if you're looking for human grade. Brewer's yeast contains all of the B vitamins, so that's thiamine, riboflavin, folic acid, and the other ones. But what's great for your ducks is that it contains vitamin B3, which is niacin, and they need that for healthy growth. What the B vitamins do is they help break down carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, which provide the body with energy. It also serves up amino acids that your body can't produce on its own. And in just half a tablespoon, there's an amazing 11 grams of protein, which is actually more than chickpeas or steak. This one probably has more because it's for a horse. So ducklings need about 10 milligrams of niacin per day, and adult ducks a bit more. So that means you're looking at a dose of about 1 to 2 tablespoons of brewer's yeast to their daily feed. And however you split that up, there's about 5 milligrams of niacin in 1 tablespoon of brewer's yeast, so you can do the maths. One thing to know about ducklings is they grow much faster than chicks, and around 7 to 9 weeks old, they'll be fully feathered and no longer need a heat lamp. You might notice what looks like a hole at the base of their tail as they're maturing. And this hole is actually their oil gland. And the way that they use this is they will take their heads and their bill, and they will actually use the oil secretions to spread around their feathers to keep themselves waterproofed. You can't see it so well once their feathers come in, but just as they're at that stage of developing their feathers, you'll be able to see it quite clearly. So this brings me on to a question that I had from Madeline. Can they live in a coop with chickens? So we got our ducklings around July, and it was actually nice and warm outside at that time, meaning we had no problem with the weather transferring them outdoors, because they went from the brooder to an outdoor pen which was inside the chicken run, so they were separated from the older chickens. And then at night what I would do is I would lift them from their little pen and I would situate them back inside their black tub, and I would put the lid on. So what I was doing at that point was just giving them a secure protected nest inside the chicken coop, and they actually don't need to have water with them at night. After that, so they were with our older chickens, and then in August our baby chicks arrived, and by the time the baby chicks had left their brooder, which was like another 3 months later, I did have the ducks and the chickens together for a time, and there was no issue with it from a dominance point of view, but it did become a bit of a hassle to manage. And that's because you quickly realize that you need to have separate water sources for the ducks. Your ducks are going to muddy any available drinking water that they can get access to. And then the other thing is that since ducks don't go up to roost, invariably they would end up sitting in a spot underneath where the chickens were pooping, and it was just a bit too busy in the coop once everybody was in there all together. But temperament-wise, there was no issue with the birds, and we even had the young guineas, the Keats, in there at the same time, and everyone got along just fine. Another comment on keeping them together with chickens is that as our roosters matured, they did start trying to mate with the ducks, so that was another thing that we wanted to discourage. And so now the way we have it set up is that the ducks live in a separate area of the garden, and although they do free range together, the rooster doesn't seem to think that they're his birds anymore because they don't share the same living space with him. So the duck coop that we built is about 4 foot by 4 foot square, and it's basically a frame of pallets that we screwed together in a cube, and then we lined it with old feed sacks on the outside of the pallets, and then we put on exterior cladding from tree trimmings from the sawmill. We have one side where it completely opens up like a giant portcullis door, and that's to make it easier to access the eggs or to clean it out properly. We do have a DIY video of putting the duck coop together, which I will link here for you in case you want to go and see the details of how we did that. Although our ducks did use a ramp when they were in the chicken coop, they actually do prefer to be on the ground. So on the duck house, instead of a ramp, we installed an automatic coop door, as you can see. We have this door actually on all of our coops, and again, I'll link the video that we have about the coop door here in case you want more info on that product. So to answer the question, do they need a pond? It really is down to the breed. One of the other questions were, do they like water as much as other ducks? Talking about Khaki Campbells, because the breed are actually a heritage duck which originally developed from Indian runner ducks. And much like Indian runner ducks, Khaki Campbell ducks are more of a land-based foraging duck. So they do actually prefer to be on land most of the day, and you'll find they go foraging for spiders and bugs. And as long as they just have a bowl of water where they can fully submerge their head so that they can clean out their sinuses, then they are totally happy. Now don't get me wrong, they absolutely do enjoy a splash and a play in water, and in the warmer months last year I was watching them have plenty of fun in a kiddie pool which I was using. But I think most duck owners will relate to how it does become tedious to dump out and refill kiddie pool bathtub every day. So when we built the duck coop, at the back we installed an old bath which serves as a sort of a rainwater catchment system from the roof of the duck coop. And at the same time the bathtub has a plug so that it's easy to drain. It doesn't have a pipe, it just drains straight onto the ground. Now our ducks don't actually use it that much right now. They probably will more so when it gets hot, but that might vary from breed to breed in terms of how much they like to be in the water. The last thing to consider about accommodating ducks is where they're going to lay their eggs. Being back in the chicken coop, I did observe that the ducks didn't use the nesting boxes. I've heard that some ducks will, However, the nature of ducks is that they tend to lay their eggs in a nest on the ground. Now, I used to think it was a given that you get dirty eggs from ducks because they lay on the ground, but actually, if you build them a nest and put a fake decoy egg in the nest, they will actually use the same nest to lay every day. They'll all use the same spot, and that way you can keep your eggs nice and clean. Ducks do go broody as well, and it usually happens when if you haven't collected the eggs for a couple of days and there's a big clutch that they can sit on, and what they'll do is they'll bury themselves in the bedding and sort of drag it on top of themselves. We give them hay to bed down on, however, they don't have water inside their duck house. So if you are going to use hay, just be sure to keep it dry and change often, because their manure will build up and make it wet. And of course, damp hay can breed an environment for mold, so you just got to watch out for that. So a question came in from Caprice about, do we eat the eggs? And yes, we absolutely do. Khaki Campbell ducks are known to be prolific egg layers, and they actually outperform most of our chickens. They lay a large white egg, and although there is, I'd say, barely any taste difference when comparing it to a chicken egg, nutritionally there is quite a lot of difference. Duck eggs have a lot more to offer. As a whole egg, they have a much larger yolk, and they're also higher in fat and in protein. But interestingly, the protein of a duck egg is actually completely different to the protein in a chicken egg. And so there are people out there who have a digestive problem and find they have an incompatibility with chicken eggs, but those same people usually find that they don't get any ill side effects from eating duck eggs. It was actually our ducks who were the heroes during the winter, and they kept us with a fresh supply of eggs all winter long, even when our chickens had stopped laying. Speaking of winter and ducks migrating, to answer a couple of questions that came in about domestic ducks and the migrating nature of wild ducks, Finnish Fierce asked, why don't they just fly away? And Tammy also commented that she has a couple of wild mallards in her pond, but is having trouble getting them to stay around. So the main difference is that domestic ducks cannot fly any distance like wild ducks. My ducks will probably fly up to about 50 feet, and they stay pretty close to the ground when they are trying to fly. So the main reason that they don't fly away is probably because domestic ducks cannot fly, and so they don't migrate for the winter. And that probably answers your question, Tammy, about why you're having trouble getting the wild mallards to stay long-term in your pond. I think it's the domestic versus the wild nature of ducks. Our ducks consider our yard to be their home, and so they return every night to their coop just like chickens, and they do that year round. So if ducks are not migrating, you might be thinking then that's a problem for the winter months. Well, actually, over the winter, the ducks do tolerate the cold, and they tolerate it just as well as the chickens. I did not have a heat source in their coop, other than to say the coop that we built has a windproof plastic sheeting underneath the cladding, sort of like a house wrap that stops the icy wind from penetrating the walls. But all we did to see them through the winter was supply extra hay for bedding. I would give them warm water twice a day so that they could keep their sinuses cleaned out. And I gave them some extra feed for burning calories so that they could stay warm. But other than that, they're really easy keepers in the winter. Something that's actually quite interesting that I learned last winter about ducks is that they have a mechanism to guard against their feet freezing. So it turns out that they have this really cool heat exchange mechanism where they can regulate how much heat they lose through their feet via their blood circulation. So that's why you can see ducks standing on ice with no problem. And it also protects them from getting frostbite down to about 20 degrees. Our temperatures here in northeast Missouri do get down to about -10, and wind chill can take it way lower than that. So I did see some days where the ducks did choose to stay in, but they do try to go out in the snow. The problem is they don't move well in the snow, so they can easily get stuck. So it is worth keeping an eye on them so that they don't get picked off by any hungry predators that might be out for a winter meal. So moving on to what they bring to the homestead, the Front Acre asks, about their laying habits and their personalities. So as I was saying earlier, one of the main reasons that we wanted to get ducks was for the duck eggs, and they have been very faithful layers. However, I like to say that they do it with a smile. Ducks have a huge personality, and I think every duck owner will agree. They are chatty, they'll actually respond to my voice, they are fun to watch, they're actually really easy to train, and they're easy to herd because they stay together as a flock. They're not dominant in any way, although we don't have a drake yet. I have read and heard that male ducks are not going to challenge you like a rooster can. And actually, after we had an experience with a dominant rooster, I was definitely sold on the idea of ducks when I read how chilled out and relaxed male ducks are. So Madeline asks, what are ducks mostly helpful for? Well, another reason that I wanted some ducks was for the benefits that they would bring to the garden, both to forage and to fertilize. So as I said, Khaki Campbells are a breed of ducks that are primarily land-based, and they are super hunters of all larger garden pests. They will eat all manner of bugs that the chickens will actually turn their nose up at, and they will chase them all over the garden. It's actually quite funny to watch them. They love to eat house spiders, and they will go out of their way all the way around the outside of our buildings looking for spiders around the baseboards. They do cover a large area of ground around the house and in the backyard, but I don't see them wander into the woods or onto the road like the chickens do. So a couple of questions did come in about managing in the garden. Jessica asks, do they tear up the garden plants? I know they don't scratch, but do they eat everything? And Caitlin asks, I have a 10th acre for 3 ducks coming next month. Will they tear up the yard? It is a legitimate question. And Hickenhand Maid asks also, will they destroy the garden if they're allowed to free range in it? So here's what I can share about ducks in the garden. Ducks will eat some grass, and they will nibble on some leaves. They do like salad greens, and they will quite happily eat strawberry ends and cucumber slices if I'm to give them kitchen scraps. However, they are limited in what they can eat by the size and shape. For example, when I have had whole grapes or whole cherry tomatoes in amongst some scraps for the chickens, I'll see the chickens stab those fruit and run off, but the ducks actually can't get a hold of them because they're the wrong shape. So just like with chickens in the garden, I will probably keep the ducks off the young plants just by protecting the plants themselves with a chicken tunnel until the plants become more established. But I don't think I will worry about the fruit produce being pecked at the way that chickens would do. Jessica is correct in saying that they don't rake around the soil like chickens, so they don't sort of rake and scratch up seedlings, but they do have flat feet and they will trample things. So for that reason, I probably keep them off young seedlings. I told somebody on Instagram last week that I'd never seen them up on the raised beds, thinking that my seedlings would be safe from the ducks up on the raised beds, but the same day I was proved wrong, and here's the video footage to prove it.
Just when I was saying ducks don't get up on raised beds, you monkeys. Just when I was saying ducks don't get up on raised beds. You need a hand to get down. How are you going to do that?
So Paradise Mining courteously asks how to stop them making a mess everywhere. Well, I don't expect that you would stop them making a mess. So perhaps it's about containing the mess or where you let them roam. Their manure is very garden friendly. Even the pond water can go directly on the garden without being composted or cleaned or amended in any way. And I would definitely like to do more with that in the future as we put in our small pond with aquatic plants. However, they do poop a lot when they're out and wandering about, so it might be a drawback for you depending on your setup. We do like to try and keep them off the pavements and definitely out of the garage. Tegan asks, do you ever eat your ducks? And the answer to that is a quick and simple no, we don't. They're just like our laying hens. But this does lead on to the next question asked by Sasha Murphy. Do you ever have issues with predators? So although we don't eat our ducks, there are plenty of wildlife that will, given the opportunity. Around here we have fox, we have coyotes, we have raccoons and bobcats, and they are all super stealthy predators when it comes to ducks or chickens. I'd say the easiest answer to that is either keeping them cooped up when the predator pressure is high, like now during early spring, or getting a dog like a livestock guardian dog whose job it is to stay with the flock and protect them. You could also use an electric poultry netting to keep them safe. Fox will hunt in the day and also will owls and hawks, so they definitely need added protection. We have guinea fowl prowling our yard and hopefully doing a job of being on the lookout right now. When guineas see something in our yard that doesn't look quite right, they make a noise that is louder than most car alarms. So last question from Madeline, what is the most difficult thing about ducks? And Jay and Flynn, you might want to make note of this for when your Pekings arrive. Ducks dig holes, and I've heard people say that they dig them all over the yard. Now, we had a bit of that going on last year, and I did notice that it happened mostly in the wet spots where I had dumped out the water from the kiddie pool repeatedly and it had made the ground soft. They like to get their bills in there and to filter the silty mud through their beaks. And I'd say that they can probably work up a hole that's just about big enough to twist your ankle in if you're not careful. So it's definitely something you want to watch out for. But like I say, I only saw them doing it here when they could get access to soft, wet ground. So maybe it's not a problem with us this year, having the bathtub and an area of the garden that isn't getting the water dumped out all the time. Well, I hope this gives you some tips and encouragement if you're looking to get started with backyard ducks. As always, drop me a comment below if you have questions, and I will see you in the next one.